Hi everyone, we would like to present to you our project, DriveThru Hacking, now with delivery. So why have we chosen this project? Because we think it's an area that is under research and we would like to highlight that these gaps can easily be weaponized to extract key insights. So earlier Chuck has introduced us. Alina is not here with us today. We have Chen and Chee Peng and myself, Benjamin. So these are some of the insights we have came across while carrying out this project. Dashcams has become a necessity for vehicle ownership, and based on our research, at least 8 out of 10 are installed with dashcams. The primary reason for this is it helps to assist with insurance claims and as well as lower insurance premiums. On the map on the right here is where some of the dashcams are being manufactured. So most of the popular brands are manufactured in Asia, such as Blackview, 70My, Tingware, and they have also gained traction in North America. Primary reason for that is based on the competitive cost, as well as dashcam owners are usually prioritizing footage quality over security, or security may not even be of their secondary or tertiary concerns. Now the problem with this is that many of these dashcams actually share the same hardware and even firmware. That would mean that actually a single exploit could affect multiple models from these brands. And on the bottom right corner is Singapore, where we are from. So this is a study of over 1,000 observable SSIDs back in Singapore where we have carried out our research. So we have scanned over 1,000 SSIDs and we have also purchased over 20 dashcams and involved over 40 participants to help validate our work. Some of these brands in the pie charts here can be seen in the earlier slide too, as well, such as Blackview, iRoad, or 70My. And a popular brand that we observe here that is entering the North America regions as well is the iRoad. So the agenda for today's briefing we'll be going through the red module, which is a controlled hacking of the dashcams, followed by the blue module on how we can harden these dashcams, dashboard where we will show our insights, the responsible disclosure, and as well as some recommendations on how manufacturers and users could take. So we have here a flow of how the attack works. So this is a drive-thru. A driver will pull up through the drive-thru, and we will then identify the SSIDs, connect to it, preferably without the vehicle owner's attention and knowledge. We will then carry out a bypass, authenticate to the dashcam, dump out the footages, sabotage it, and so on. And all of these steps are being carried out in an automated fashion. Now, the same attack flow here can be seen in the earlier slide. So there are 10 stages in total. So we have removed the dashcam brands and replaced them with alphabets. So that this is to mask and give privacy to the dashcam manufacturers, as well as to give them time to come up with a patch for the vulnerabilities we have identified. So different attack stages apply to different dashcam models, and my teammates, George and Chee Peng, will be going through the attack flow in detail, and also demonstrating them from different point of views to get a more holistic picture of how our attack would look. So in the first attack stage, it's all about discovery. So this is rather similar to wall driving, except that we prefer to be in a stationary location. We have actually tried exploiting this on the move, but perhaps due to our driving skills, we were not able to we were not able to maintain the distance between the vehicles to keep the connection alive. So perhaps if we are better drivers, this would be a very viable option. So the car here in the video is actually driving through the drive-thru, and the middle column is where our hacking script is running in the background, preferably without the victim's knowledge. So our tool, the drive-thru, will perform a discovery scan, and then it will provide the attacker's dashcam SSID for us to select. We would select the SSID, and based on that, we would run a model-specific script to execute, and then it would then assess where the footages are stored, dump it out, upload to our C2 server, and pass it on to our LLM pipeline for further processing. George, could you step us through how we can connect to the dashcams?
Yeah, the 2,000 dashcams we bought and tested fall into 16 brands, illustrated on the screen. Of these 16 brands, 15 were shipped with the same default passwords for all their dash cams, and only one is shipped with unique password for each physical dash cam that's randomly generated. And even then, that password combination is made up of exactly 8 alphabets in lowercase. According to multiple research we've come across, this will take hours, if not less, to crack the captured handshake using cloud resources. But because that's longer than the duration of our drive-thru and more costly, we're not going to consider that for now. Next, out of the 4 brands, 4 made their passwords unchangeable. Essentially, anyone nearby can connect to the Dashcam's network. There's nothing much the owner can do about it. For the purpose of this drive-thru hacking, where our hacking window is small, we only want to focus on the low-hanging fruits, which are dashcams with default passwords, common passwords, or fixed passwords. We've also noticed that there were 4 brands with a very interesting setup. They've used a public domain name as their internal domain name, specifically a .com domain for their internal domain. That may result in DNS leakage or man-in-the-middle risk. What's worse is that this domain wasn't registered when we first found it. To protect the customers of these 4 dashcam brands, we've registered this domain, informed the manufacturers within 24 hours, and offered to transfer it over to them safely. They have not responded, so the domain is still with us. Moving to the third stage, many dashcams require an initial device pairing using their mobile app, where the dashcam owner needs to physically press a Wi-Fi button on the dashcam in order for the dashcam to trust the owner's phone. This second factor authentication is to prevent any remote attacks. And only one phone can be paired at any given time, without which the phone cannot connect to the dashcam. While that is what the manufacturer claims, we found that not to be true for Dashcam Model C, where we could connect directly to the HTTP server once connected to the hotspot without pairing to access the video feeds. In other words, an attacker could bypass the need to physically press the Wi-Fi button to register the device and launch a completely remote attack. Now, there are certain dashcams that emit voice guidance when instructions are executed. So, if we are executing the drive-thru hacking nearby, car owners might hear some activities going on the dashcams. To overcome that, we could temporarily reduce or disable the voice guidance by making a configuration change at the start of the script and then restoring the volume at the end of the script. In the case of Dashcam Model C, it's just an additional couple of API calls that we had to make to silence the voice guidance. Let's look at another example. For the 4 brands that had fixed passwords, we relied on device pairing, supposedly the second factor, as their main authentication method, since the default password can't be changed. This is how it works. The Wi-Fi button is needed to unlock the dashcam for a short window at the server side for pairing. So there was nothing we could influence from a client side. But when we examined how the state of pairing was managed, we found that the dashcam was remembering the MAC address of the paired device. What that means is that an attacker could spoof the trusted device's MAC address and bypass device pairing. And that's exactly how we did it in our Kali Pi, shown in the middle column here, where we first performed an ARP scan to obtain the trusted device MAC address, which is the phone in this case, spoofed the MAC address, and then got full access to the dashcam without needing physical access to the dashcam. We could also potentially force our device to be paired with the driver's dashcam. In this POC in the middle column, we are spamming the dashcam with requests to pair from our script. The dashcam would then respond 3 consecutive times saying, press the Wi-Fi button to register the smartphone. Press the Wi-Fi button to register the smartphone, and so on. So in our script, we spam this replay attack and trigger the dashcam to play this video recording continuously until MFA fatigue sets in and the driver succumbs to pressing the Wi-Fi button, thereby granting us full access to the dashcam. So it's a very irritating vector. Once connected to the dashcam's network, we need to access the relevant file storage services. So what you see here is the port enumeration of our dashcams. Most of these devices require authentication. So we duck and use the credentials found in the APKs for the dashcams, particularly around FTP, Telnet, API, and RTSP, which stands for Real-Time Streaming Protocol. Models B and O at the top are pretty interesting because they use custom protocols. So let's take a closer look at them. For models B and O, take a look at the orange box above. When Nmap is first run, only port 7777 is open. From the APK, we understand that this is the API port. So we make a request to this API port to fetch a list of video files across 4 categories: drive, event, parking, and photo. The API port returns us with a list of video file names. Then we send a series of pre-recorded byte sequence we have captured to open up port 7778, which is the video port, and port 7779, which is the audio port. If the byte sequence sent is correct, much like port knocking, port 7778 and 9 will open for a short window to send the media files over to us. Our tool will then download both the audio and video files locally, merge them before proceeding to download the next set of media files. A quick sidetrack. When it comes to dashcams with cloud synchronization, it gets better. Check this out. If you download the mobile app for Dashcam D, even if you do not own a dashcam, you can view the public feeds. There are many public feeds, such as the examples on the right, where anyone can tap into the video and audio feeds to monitor what's going on in those cars. For instance, in feed number 1 in the middle, we see a car owner helping another with a problematic faulty cash card. And if we continue watching the feed, the helpful car owner continues the drive and parks inside his car garage, giving us a good view of his house and address on map. In feed number 2, a couple of tourists got up a ride-hailing service and were exchanging slimming tips, as well as mentioning names of common friends and contacts, and even their dinner plans. There is no way they could have known that their conversations would be publicly live-streamed. We've highlighted this seeming misconfiguration to the dashcam manufacturer, but the dashcam manufacturer's response is that this is an intended feature, and customers need to read the fine prints in the red box within the app, which actually says, by sharing your live view, you can let other users vicariously experience the excitement and pleasure of driving all over the world, which in our opinion is written very optimistically without much emphasis on privacy. While the videos are being downloaded, let's turn our attention to see if we can remotely root these devices. In Dashcam Model K, we found an unauthenticated upload endpoint on the HTTP server. After fingerprinting the web server, we created a CGI-based web shell and uploaded to this web server. In step 3, you can see that we were able to run remote commands successfully through the web shell. We then dumped out the etc password and shadow files and cracked the root password to escalate our privilege. In terms of impact, there are many possibilities. For instance, we can change the URL shortcuts within the configurations such that the dashcam owner would download our malware when trying to download the dashcam viewer on the phone. Or we could sabotage the car battery by turning off battery protection and draining the car battery overnight when the car is parked. Here's an interesting one. Recall this brand does not allow users to change SSID password. Guess what? By overwriting the configuration file, we were able to change the Wi-Fi password. Effectively, we could hack it to harden it. On the flip side, attackers can also change this password to lock the actual dashcam owner out. And especially for Dashcam Model K, there is no reset button. Lastly, we tried to upgrade our web shell to a reverse shell by uploading a netcat binary. However, when we tried to run it, our dashcam got bricked. So these things are pretty delicate. Do exercise caution when tinkering with them. In Dashcam model G, we see the same pattern where we could either make API calls to change the Dashcam configurations or override the config file via a similar unauthenticated upload endpoint on the HTTP server. In this case, the upload functionality is exposed on the parent directory itself, so it's easy to find. For Dashcam model Q, we were able to obtain its root password from the etc password and shadow files exposed on the web server, log into Telnet, and trigger a script to cause the Dashcam to crash because the camera has a weak network stack. Effectively, we are disabling it from remotely. As you can see, the light changes from green to blue to red. What makes this worse is that the model has a built-in battery and no way to restart. So the owner would have to wait for the battery to be drained before being able to turn it back on. And that might take half an hour or more, depending on the battery life. In Dashcam model L, we downloaded the Dashcam's firmware from the manufacturer's website and bin walked on it to find out the passwords to the user and root accounts. And since Telnet was open, we were able to easily gain root remote access to the Dashcam. And once we are in as root, we can pretty much do whatever we want. Plant backdoors, override firmware, etc. As the car in the drive-thru heads forward to pick up the order, we're thinking, rather than just a one-off dumping of the video files, can we continue to do this remotely even after the vehicle exits the drive-thru? Especially if the file transfer is slow and we need more time. So we've explored uploading command and control or C2 scripts into 4 or 5G based dashcams, which in our observations have been gaining popularity, at least in Singapore. If you are unfamiliar with 4G based dashcams, these cameras typically have a SIM card slot or the ability to connect to a hotspot to allow the car owners to view their dashcam feeds remotely or even track their car's location. And that internet connection is what we are riding on to call back to our C2 server. One of the challenges we faced was on persisting our C2 scripts to survive the reboot, which we'll share some methods in the next slide. But assuming a situation where we can't find any suitable persistence mechanisms, the next best alternative would be for us to disable the auto shutdown config of the dashcam when the vehicle is turned off. In our example above, using Dashcam W, Telnet was open, so we could run our C2 script directly, which beacons back to our C2 server in stipulated intervals to pull new instructions to execute. The first few instructions are typically on enumeration to confirm the location of the GPS data on the SD card, as well as the location of the media files. Once that is established, our C2 server will then instruct the C2 script that is on the dashcam to start forwarding the media files. In the screenshot on the right, the FTP put utility was available on the dashcam, so we lift off the land and use that for exfiltration. Now, Chee, Peng, can you share methods that I could use to persist my C2 script?
Sure, George. Let's look at some of the ways we can achieve persistence for the C2 scripts in our dashcam. To make our change persistent, we need to ensure that our dashcam runs the custom scripts every time it powers on. And to do that, we need to understand the location of our scripts to inject whenever the dashcam is being powered on. So to do that, our dashcam, like any other dashcam, will run scripts in the following manner when it runs the init configurations, such as init tab, RCS scripts, to run the necessary process for the dashcams to power on. So for the dashcam W, it actually runs the init scripts all the way from S00 all the way to S99. And for the dashcam L, after the init scripts are being launched, application scripts such as the go-ahead web servers are being launched. So the first way to achieve persistence is to hook onto the application scripts. So in order to do so, we start by gaining root access through one of the ways that George had mentioned previously, which is either through exposed telnet or SSH, or if not, we can actually upload a web shell to get a reverse shell to gain root access. So thereafter, we notice that Dashcam L actually runs these go-ahead SH scripts every time. So we can actually inject our scripts over here to make sure that it starts every time the dashcam is being powered on. But however, there are limitations to such a case because most of the dashcams, such as Dashcam W, it has a read-only file systems, and any changes that we write onto the go-ahead application scripts actually goes into the RAM but not the flash. So every time when you power off the dashcams will reboot and our scripts will be gone. So you need to find another way to actually gain persistence. And to do that, we go on to the second method, which is that we hook onto the binary itself to make it more persistent. So the second method will be the binary strip hook. So it is more complex and complicated because it modifies the core system components. So in the case of Dashcam W, we observe that the normal init sequence actually runs the scripts in S00 all the way to S99 whenever the Dashcam boots. At S15, we notice that there is a run ISP daemon over there. So yeah, I mean, as per any other Dashcam, you'll notice that this folder this file didn't exist in the user bin folder. So we can actually do whatever a red teamer will actually do, write these scripts, create a file, ISP daemon, put our scripts inside, and just load it inside. And realize that it's actually writable directory. So we can actually write our scripts inside so that whenever the Dashcam actually boots, it gets loads every time the Dashcam is being powered on. So, but however, the word of caution over here is because the scripts inside the RCS, they actually run the scripts from S00, S01, all the way to S99. So if there's any mistakes that you make in S15, so for example, in my case, I actually accidentally write a while loop, and I actually, because it cannot proceed on to S25, S99, my Dashcam actually cannot boot up and actually gets bricked. So yeah, do exercise precautions. And if you want to brick someone's camera, just write a file inside, and yeah, you can make their Dashcam breaks. So after establishing persistence for our C2 Dashcam for any exploitation, we want to download our files to see what useful information could be obtained. So after downloading the files, we can use LLM to process the audio and videos to gain meaningful insights in the following manners. So first, we start by extracting the videos files using a Python video processing library. Next, we use machine learning for classification and predictions to predict any road signs found in the frames. So for frames that actually consist of road signs, street signs, or this, we apply an OCR tool such as Google Cloud Visions to extract the road name. And finally, we use LLM to guess the locations from the road name and to get the lat long of the GPS coordinate, which is then used to map out the route that our drivers took. So moving on to the processing of audio recordings. So we first use Shazam to identify any background music or songs in the video, in the audio, because I mean, most of us will just listen to music along the way when we drive, right? So next, we use OpenAI Whisper in parallel for transcriptions. If there's any songs identified, we will then remove the lyrics from the transcription so as to get an accurate representation for the transcript spoken. Finally, we summarize a clean transcript to generate insights to make the output engaging and easy to interpret. We even generate a comic from AI to make it more engaging. So yeah, all these results are actually being brought together into a final dashboard for easy review. So in these examples, we can see 3 categories of insights. So over there on the bottom left, we have songs, Sticky by Kiss of Life being captured. So we can also see the travel routes being mapped out. So in this case, it's actually in Singapore, it's quite small. So yeah, the driver actually traveled in the west area of Singapore. Then we can also see things like confidential discussions being made. So for example, there's business topics being discussed such as partnerships, new launches, and we actually can summarize all this into a simple AI comic to make it more interactive. Yeah, this shows an example of how a single dashcam can be exploited to generate a rich picture of activities and raise serious privacy concern. So with enough audio and video, yeah, you can actually profile a person and even target high-profile individuals to extract sensitive conversations. So, for example, you can target any upcoming new launches somewhere, yeah, if you know the person, yeah. So, with our red hacking tools, we ran a controlled test on 40 participants to check the real-world exploitability and to estimate how widespread the problems are. So, result at a glance. So, you can see 11 out of 40 devices are actually being compromised. So while our initial scripts did work in our lab environment to compromise, some of the scripts actually failed due to various reasons such as configuration differences. So for the successful ones, it is because the dashcam and configs are similar to our training set of dashcams. And password posture is a major driver of success. So if you look at the last row, yeah, only 7 dashcam had changed their default passwords to stronger ones. And the reason for such a low number is actually, unfortunately, 65% of our participants actually use dashcams from the 4 big brands that doesn't allow password change. So you can't change your password, then yeah, you got hacked. Yeah, so for the rest of the things that can change password, half of them did. And it might be worth mentioning that out of the 20 second-hand dashcam cameras that we bought, 5 actually came with SD card, which still had recordings in them, so you can actually see what have they done. Yeah, so hygiene is really bad for the dashcam industry. Yeah. So after hacking so many different dashcams, we realized that the approach to hacking new dashcams is largely similar at a high level. So we started crystallizing the approach to hacking new dashcams. So for example, if you're given a new dashcam today, so say dashcam X, the first thing that we do is to find out if there is a desktop compatible app. So if there is one, we could just use it and sniff the traffic that's going through in between the app. Then we can figure out what the traffic is about, replay the attack, use a Wireshark, all this to sniff out what is happening in between them. And if you can't figure out what is happening in the first run, you can always replay the attack because you can just keep simulating the traffic, all this. Yeah. So if there is no desktop apps applicable, we can use a proxy app, one that's not intended for the camera, but because of code-based reuse, we can actually use them to run our dashcam also. So yeah, this is the thing. We also can use, try to get some documentation audit. So for example, we can look into APKs. So APKs contains a lot of things like connection, authentication mechanism, all this. We can also look at the firmware publicly available and reverse them to see what are some of the authentication mechanisms, connections, how they connect, all these things, and for us to understand more about the dashcam. So network discovery is also important for anything. So Nmap is useful over here. Then we can figure out what services is being on, or the ports, all that. Yeah. We then also then after all this is being done, we actually done a manual probe to see if we are able to download the videos, ABKs, all that. Yeah. So we will capture everything into an automation script so that we can actually test them iteratively with our participants. Because and at the start of the testings, we realized that our scripts keep breaking among different participants because there's different configurations. For example, dashcam K, a dashcam might have a different, whether there's audio enabled, GPS enabled, or maybe the video settings, like 1080p versus 720p. So because of all these configuration drift, some of our scripts might broke along the way. So we need to test them iteratively so that it can gain robustness. So now we have spent time to see how we can hack our dashcam. So we want to see how we can actually, defend them. So we actually come out together to see how we can create a blue module, which is to harden our dashcams, to see how we can actually defend them against all these exploits that have been mentioned earlier. And these are the 4 high-level steps overview of what can be created to create our blue defense module. So let me go through them. So for our blue module to work, similar to how we gain root access, we need to gain root access through telnet or any because for some models there's no telnet enabled. But since we have the dashcam ourselves, we can actually, for some dashcam, we can actually load a script into the micro SD card, something like a load telnet or something. You put it inside, and telnet actually is being enabled in that sense. So this is for those advanced users who wants to make modifications to their dashcam. So you can actually do that, and with that we are able to gain root access to the dashcam. Next, we have to gain persistence to make sure that our defense scripts loads every time the dashcam is being powered on. And in that case, we can actually use back one of the few methods that was being discussed earlier for persistence. And because usually dashcams, they have limited storage space, we will need to store our scripts into the micro SD card, and all the logs that's being generated, we will all store them into the micro SD card. And yeah, we have created a simple detect module to keep track of all the MAC address that tries to connect to the dashcam. And because usually dashcams, they are shipped as basic as possible, so there isn't much tools available. So we actually created a Wi-Fi client management tool. So we actually compile a host APD CLI and store in the external storage. And because most of the dashcams have only does not have execution rights in the root, so we might need to transfer it to the temp folder to actually execute it effectively. Yeah. So this is how we created our protect module, which is to only allow whitelisted MAC address and kicks out any other MAC address. So as you can see, anyone who tries to connect to the internet, they will get kicked out, and there's a logs that's capturing all the non-whitelisted IPs and MAC address. Yeah. So more than just layer 2 protections, we have also implemented a simple layer 7 or WAF with access controls, rate limiting, file traversal, file load protection to gain out and to provide more for our dashcams. So this is done by creating a WAF wrapper onto all the scripts and hook it onto the application scripts. So whenever the user interact with the dashcam via the app or web server, you actually triggers the CGI application scripts, process all this. And if we were to hook our scripts onto the CGI process, in this case, we actually will be able to protect our dashcam. And this is how sample it looks like when a non-whitelisted IP tries to connect to the dashcam through our app. So you can see, it's given the 403 forbidden when it tries to connect. Yeah. So with our current implementation of the Blue module is actually software-based, we are thinking of creating something like a physical or hardware dongle that could perform the same hardening for our dashcam, so that when you can just insert in the hardware dongle and it can create this protection for a dashcam, so that it can be commercially available next time. Yeah. And now Benjamin will demo the capabilities of our Red and Blue modules.
Thank you, Chee, Peng, and George. So as you can see, this drive-thru hacking actually is pretty invasive. You could actually find out about someone's personal life, find out where they have gone to, or even stalk someone like a VIP person, all without their knowledge. So this is a service that we actually have that actually people can use, but unfortunately it's not released to the public. So on the left side, you can see the red module hacking, where a user could log in, display how many credits do they have, and select what actions do they want to do. For example, a controlled hacking of a particular dashcam they want to try it on. Now, on the right side is the blue module, where it's similar interface, where the user logins, pay for amount of credits to run the scripts. And there are two parts to this blue module. So the first part is actually patching it, and the second part will be retrieving the logs from the dashcam after the dashcam has been patched. So all of this output is actually presented in our dashboard here, a web dashboard, where all the information is piped in, and the user could select the SSID, find out where a particular user has went to, their conversations in the vehicle, and also the logs that are being piped out from the blue module in case if anyone needs them for investigations. So let's summarize the vulnerabilities and the conditions that we have come across during our drive-thru hacking and for them to succeed. So from the top in the blue, so starting with the dashcams with the highest market share that's visible on Singapore roads, we have the bypassing of device registration and pairing devices. But the condition for this vector to work is that the driver actually needs to be connected to the dashcam first for us to be able to register and to simulate the MAC address of the connected device. Next in yellow, so we have unauthenticated web server, where the only layer of protection for this is the Wi-Fi password. So in the event that the Wi-Fi password is changed, we will have to rely on traditional password cracking methods in order to crack it, which is not impossible, it just takes a little bit more time to carry it out. And lastly, in purple, we have unauthenticated web servers. The last in purple, if the passwords are default or common, then all we need to do is to find out the default passwords through their manual or online documentation, and we'll be able to get in. So there are different ways to bypass the device or app pairing. It could be on a device level, a network level, app level, depending on how the control mechanism was developed. For the access of media files, some dashcams expose their FTP, Telnet, HTTP, and so on. So dumping the footages out is quick and easy. And even if there is authentication, we were able to find out the plain text password either through online documentations or by looking into their APK or by sniffing the traffic. And for dashcams with exposed upload interface, we are also able to upload web shells to gain remote root access to the dashcams. From a responsible disclosure perspective, these are some of the manufacturers that we have disclosed to. We have also made sure to send them follow-up emails in case the first ones are being missed out. And out of these 16 brands, actually only one of them has a dedicated security email inbox. 10 of them have a generic email address that we can reach out to, and the budget cam did not have any contact information, so they aren't included above. 5 of them have accepted our findings, out of which only 1 of them have applied mitigation through mobile app updates, and 2 are actively working on the fix. We spoke to one of the manufacturers and understood that while they didn't have any PCERT, bug bounty, or vulnerability disclosure programs, that's about to change because our emails to them were missed out initially. So that's a big win for us to be able to influence dashcam manufacturers. So after disclosing to the manufacturers, we also want to provide a heads up to the dashcam owners. So based on our DriveThru hacking attack flow, here are our assigned CVEs. We can also see that there are many opportunities here, both in finding vulnerabilities, as well as for manufacturers to step up security. While many of these CVEs are low in severity, but when chained together, they can lead to the compromise of a dashcam and even allow an attacker to gain remote root access. Submitting these CVEs also serve as a form of documentation for us and for public awareness. And here are some of the recommendations to vendors to help further enhance the dashcam security. So perhaps dashcam manufacturers could allow users to have an option to change the default password, or also allow them to change the SSIDs of the dashcams, as many of them are default and could easily be identified just by the names. They could also adopt alternate authentication methods such as using a passkey or certificate-based authentication. And we also like to highlight that maybe they could use proper encryption protocols, as we have come across many plain text passwords appearing through their documentation or embedded within their APK. As for the users, perhaps if there is an option, they should change the default SSIDs and the default password to something stronger, like a passphrase, and only turn on the Wi-Fi function if there's such an option. So this is our ongoing journey. We have first started out earlier in April 2023, demonstrating DriveThru hacking in Black Hat Asia. And we have developed that into something further, which we have presented today, DriveThru with delivery in SecTor. And we are not stopping there. We will be demonstrating on how we can leverage and turn these dashcams into a botnet, more specifically into a botnet on the move, so perhaps infecting more and more dashcams as a user drive through a boulevard. We would also like to take a moment to appreciate our fallen comrades of their contributions to the cause. Well, we try not to have any fatalities, but accidents do happen, and these hardwares are tricky and sensitive. But we have possibly found a way to perhaps revive these comrades, maybe turn them into Frankensteins, and well, still in the process of doing that, and we hope to see them in action by CES. Thank you. That's our presentation. And if there's any questions, please line up at the mic. We'll be happy to take them. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Quick question. Great presentation. I'm wondering, have you heard about a recent publicized vulnerability? I think it was the Nexar Dashcam brand. So I'm wondering, I guess for those who don't know, it's also one of those cloud-enabled dashcams that uploads their videos, and you can view it on a public map and click around. But they also had a secondary upload to an AWS S3 bucket for their backups for the videos. And all the dash cams shared the same AWS key, or the AWS key. could access every camera's backups, basically. So I'm wondering, like, in your investigations, did you look at any of the back-end pieces of infrastructure that did the uploading to look for vulnerabilities or anything there? Because I imagine, if some of these, if the front-end security on the telnet interface is so bad, then they're probably not using best security practices for their cloud infrastructure either.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's an interesting area to look at. We did look at some of the endpoints, especially when we were looking at the APKs. So we were looking at how the file storage was stored. We didn't find much there, but I think the only reason to that is because we didn't look hard enough. I'm pretty sure that there would be. Many of the dash cams, they use kind of shared services as well, shared backbone. So code-based reuse, shared infrastructure. One of the areas that we looked at was also on remote control, where we try to, for especially for connected cars, where we try to capture the requests, we try to see whether we could potentially replace some of these. We did have minor findings. We did send it to the car manufacturers, but nothing significant to share. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. We have a couple more minutes if anyone has any questions. It's interesting though, because as we were driving down the roads, we didn't see a lot of dash cams, so we were just turning on. We didn't do any drive-thru hacking, but we were just turning on our Wi-Fi scanners, Bluetooth scanners. So we didn't see that many dash cams, on the roads.
Yeah.
How many of you use a dash cam for your cars? Okay, and how many of you have Wi-Fi enabled on those cars, to your phone at least?
Tesla, so what happened to the Tesla, everything?
Right. Okay, so a handful, yeah. Cool. If not, thank you all. I'll return you guys 3 minutes.